There it goes.
All right, so we've already introduced ourselves, and yeah, you guys all are here, so you already know the initiative we're presenting to you guys about today. So go ahead to the next slide there, Katie.
Working on it. It's thinking.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, got it.
So we're just going to ask you guys to stay muted when you're not talking just throughout the presentation. And you can ask any questions that you have in the chat as we go, and we'll get to them at the end. We did the introductions, and then we'll just overview what Color Your School Green is, and then we'll go over the connection to Color Your Community Green. And then we'll get everyone acquainted with Slack and get everyone onto the Color Your School Green Slack. And then at the end, we'll answer the questions.
So this is the general overview of what Color Your School Green is and sort of the idea behind it. The mission is students can use the toolkit and network to build strong high school environmental clubs that have a greater impact on their school, district, and community with an emphasis on climate solutions. That mission is pretty broad because we really hope that the environmental clubs sort of come up with their own mission and sort of make that more specific and take on their own initiatives. Because while the toolkit is there to help the clubs build, it's not like the only thing the clubs should use. We want to encourage the clubs to build themselves and become more autonomous without the toolkit. And so over here on the right, we sort of have this little ladder that shows, you know, the different levels that clubs might come in at to the toolkit. You know, they might be super active and, you know, really have their own initiatives going already. And they can still hopefully utilize the toolkit in a way that's going to help their club grow even more. And then there's also, you know, maybe there's a brand new club or a non-existent club or a club that was inactive, and that club can also come in and use that toolkit to build themselves. Yeah.
So this is our who, what, why, how. So who Color Your School Green is made up of students who are in environmental clubs or want to start one because they're passionate about environmental climate issues and they want to have an impact on their community. Color Your School Green is a network of clubs who use the toolkit and collaborate with other clubs in the area to identify how they can have a greater impact in not only their school, but their district and their community as a whole. The why we created Color Your School Green. We created Color Your School Green to empower students to implement changes to address the climate crisis with not only within their schools, but also within their communities again. And this is because there are many important strategic and climate solutions that must be implemented at the school and community level to make change. And teams will use the Color Your School Green toolkit to identify locally relevant climate solutions that they can act on and then develop strategies to move those solutions forward and enact them.
So on this slide here, we have the different parts of the toolkit. The actual toolkit itself is sort of what we call living documents, and so they're going to change over time. So over, like, the documents as they are now are not the final draft. They're even just the final altogether. These are all drafts, and so we're going to be adding to them over time and adding more documents to the toolkit overall, adding new pieces to each of the documents. So yeah, we're just gonna take a look at a couple of them and just a quick look. These are all on the RPCC website, which I can put that link in the chat right now. And if you just scroll down to the bottom of this page, you will see the toolkit there. And so you can access it there and take a look at it anytime you want. What Katie has pulled up there, that's the table of contents. It's pretty similar to what was on the slide. It has short descriptions of each of the portions of the toolkit, and then hyperlinks to each document. The only document that isn't a hyperlink is the reflection guide, which is an example of how this is a living toolkit. That document's coming soon. We plan to make that in the future, but clubs wouldn't need that until the end of the school year anyway. And at the end of this document here, you'll see we have a little box that says if you have any feedback or suggestions or questions, we're always really open to getting ideas or help or resources that you think could be really useful if we included them. So that's the email there that you can email any of those to. These documents aren't editable by anyone who's accessing them from the website, so you wouldn't be able to add them yourself. You should email us and let us know what you think. And then the next document we'll take a look at is the project menu document. So out of all the documents, the project menu and the environmental justice document are probably the meatiest documents. They are both longer documents, and they have a lot more information. The other ones are a little bit more interactive, where they have sort of questions for you to think about in building your environmental club. So the project menu has a bunch of different projects, a bunch of different initiatives that your club can take up, from little things like starting an Instagram page, or having a station in your cafeteria to write petitions or have people sign petitions, to creating a climate action plan for your school district. So you have a broad range of different initiatives there. And then I'm going to hand it off to Cecily, who did an incredible job on the environmental justice document, to show you guys that.
Thanks, Anna. So the environmental justice document is essentially a document of resources for clubs to educate themselves and the members of their clubs on environmental justice. So environmental justice is essentially working to minimize the effects of climate change as a whole, while also ensuring that people aren't differently impacted depending on their race or their income or where they live. So the document just goes into the connection between race and climate, and there are a bunch of resources that clubs can use to learn about that. And then it talks about the intersectionality of environmental issues and race with other specific issues, which as I find more resources or people send me more resources, I will add them. Like police brutality, housing, health, energy, etc. And then it goes into climate policy and how environmental justice, why it's important to implement those policies to affect environmental justice. And then there are also more general resources, just again, to learn more about environmental justice for clubs, like videos, podcasts, books. And then the document goes into environmental justice in New York State and the Rochester area specifically. So you can learn about different projects going on in New York State and Rochester and EJ communities locally. And then there's guidance from us on how to build a more intersectional club, and how you can implement environmental justice learning into your club meetings. Again, if you have any suggestions after emailing or after reading or using any resources, please email the email, which again is colorschoolgreen@gmail.com.
So the final sort of document that we're going to show you guys, which isn't exactly a document, it's a spreadsheet. And it's the only document that you can just click on the website and add things to. This document, we had the idea to sort of make a collaborative document where people could drop different people they've used to do presentations for their club, to share their any social media their club has, or contacts that they've made, and different, maybe social media accounts that they found on the internet that have been helpful to their club in learning more about, environmental justice, say, or helpful to their environmental club in any way. And so, I highly encourage all of you guys to put stuff in here that you think would be helpful to other clubs, and to put your information in here to, be able to contact other clubs if you ever want to collaborate on something. And so, the part of a piece of the Color Your School Green toolkit was to sort of have a network, a more loose network where we could just sort of have a place where environmental clubs could bounce ideas off of each other and share ideas. And so Cecily will talk about this a little later, but how we will actually do that and how that will exist. And then also to connect environmental clubs with RPCC and also other local climate-focused organizations like Rochester Youth Climate Leaders, New York Youth Climate Leaders, which I know most of the youth, all of the youth here tonight are done work with the New York Youth Climate Leaders, and then also Color Your Community Green, which brings me to the next slide, which I'm going to hand it off to Katie for.
Right. Thank you, Anna and Cecily. I'm going to talk to you for a minute about Color Your Community Green. The goal for this program is that we have teams of residents in city neighborhoods, in towns and villages all over the 9 counties of the Finger Lakes region, pushing their local leaders and elected officials to adopt high-impact climate solutions. And then the teams work together, they learn from each other, they build on each other's successes. We also really want to partner with the local school environmental clubs because we think that we can help each other move our campaigns along. We can help build success with each other. So this slide lists all of the teams that are currently in existence. And first and foremost, I need to mention Color Bright and Green. This program started 12 years ago, maybe even 13. They were really the inspiration, and they generously shared their name with the Color Your Community Green program. They currently have a tree planting campaign going on right now. You'll notice that a few of these communities have team building as their project. They're brand new teams. They maybe have just 1 or 2 people involved right now, so they're looking for teammates. And but then other communities have listed out the campaigns that they're working on. They're so different levels of development. And Amber is here, and she's actually she's the spokesperson, one of the leaders for Color Fairport Green. They have a meeting tomorrow night. Open invitation for anybody who's interested. You guys aren't in Fairport, so I'm going to move along. But if you know anybody in Fairport, please pass along the invitation. So obviously, we have one person here from Brighton. Perhaps you already have a partnership with Color Bright and Green. But Tucker, you may notice that Honeoye Falls doesn't have a team yet. And so if you know anybody who might be interested, pass along the information. We'd love to talk with them. But also, we don't have an age requirement for starting a Color Your Community Green team. So if you are interested, let us know. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to I'm not sure, Cecily or Anna, to talk about how to get involved in the network.
I think this one's me. So how to get involved, and obviously you guys are all here, but you should definitely pass on this information and the Color Your Community Green or School Green Toolkit and the website link that I put in the chat to all your friends and anyone in other districts that you think would be interested. And then I'm also going to put the link to the form that is on the slide there in the chat. That, since you guys are all here, you don't need to fill that out. But you should, again, pass that as well on to people you think who you think might be interested in finding out more about the Color Your School Green Network and Toolkit. That form will just give us their info, and we can reach out to them and get them more involved. Definitely go to the website and really dig around the toolkit. Listening to us talk about it is not nearly as exciting and interesting as actually looking at the toolkit. Even as an individual without an environmental club, that the toolkit is just very interesting to read through and think about, and it's inspiring as well. Think about all the different solutions. And yeah, like I said, talk to your friends, your classmates, people in other districts that you know. And then, yeah, I mean, so everyone here has existing environmental clubs, but well, Fairport's sort of on the line there. I know that there's a middle school club that they're trying to get started. So you know, have a meeting. That's the best way to get started, and you know, use the toolkit. If you need our help in starting a club, or and ideas for how to start a club, or how to get a first meeting together, or how to find people to join the club, reach out, and we can give you a hand. And I'll pass it off to Cecily.
Does New York Youth Climate Leaders uses Slack, right? Yeah, okay, so you all know about Slack, but for the recording, Slack is kind of like email, but it separates it from email it separates messages into separate domains. So this is a screenshot of my Slack. It's the RPCC Slack. And as you can see, there's different channels. So we created a Color Your School Green channel. And that is, it's hashtag, I'll put it in the chat, project-CYSG. So if you're in Slack, you can join that. And then also, there's the all calls to action channel, which I think everyone will get added to once they go onto the Slack. And it's climatemakers from all over the Rochester area post things here like petitions, phone calls, and other ways to get involved, etc. And it's kind of like a one-stop shop for climate work in the Finger Lakes. And then you can also message individual people, as you can see at the bottom. And then I feel like the emails in the chat is not really relevant if everyone's already on Slack.
The people here may not be in the RPCC Slack.
Oh, okay. So
Youth Climate Leaders is a separate Slack.
Email in the chat, and then we can add you to the RPCC Slack, and then therefore the Color Your School Green Slack, and you'll get an email once you're successfully added. So if you don't hear from us, if for some reason the email doesn't work, you can email coloryourschoolgreen@gmail.com again. And yeah, if you're already in the RPCC Slack, you can just join the channel. And yeah,
Did you want to go back?
no, I think we're good. Sorry.
Yeah, so now we're just going to open up to questions. That's the end of our presentation. So I see that there's Abby put a couple questions in the chat, so we can answer those. But also, if anyone else has questions, you can also, at this point, just unmute yourself and speak them. You don't have to put them in the chat. Maybe we can start with the questions that Abby has there. So what inspires you to do this work? Oh, that's cute. I love that. I mean, for me, it's definitely, climate change itself is less of an inspiration, but a motivation to do this type of thing and to, you know, create awareness and fight the climate crisis, of course. I don't know about Cecily.
Yeah, I just think that the climate crisis is really important, and it's just going to get worse as we progress through time. So I think it's really important to act now as much as we can.
And then what do you see as the primary barriers to students on taking action on climate? That's a really interesting question. I mean, one thing for sure is education. Something I've experienced in Penfield is that I think there's a general awareness, and sometimes people maybe sort of know what's going on, but don't have a full understanding of really what the climate crisis means, and or even understand that it is a climate crisis, not just global warming. And so I think that that's a pretty big barrier, and I think that's something that environmental clubs are really a huge part of breaking down, that sort of lack of education in schools especially is just, you know, educating students, helping them understand more, helping them understand how they can take action. So, you know, they're getting involved in their environmental club, but now they can get involved in Rochester Youth Climate Leaders and New York Youth Climate Leaders and RPCC. And so how can they turn this, I mean, for me, it's like a fear, it's a worry, into something more productive. Yeah, Cecily?
I definitely agree with what Anna said about education, but I think another barrier is just lack of resource or opportunity to get involved. A lot of climate organizations, or it's like harder to find people who are willing to help kids. A lot of stuff is geared toward adults. People might not have transportation to get places to do things. People might not have internet or other things. And I think it's just lack of resources or lack of information is really what stops people from taking action.
And then Amber asks, what has been your experience with environmental clubs at school in the past? What is your hope for the future of environmental clubs? I think this ties in really, really nicely with the toolkit. It's a great question. I mean, so for me, my experience with environmental clubs is we actually had an existing club in Penfield, and I'll lead it at our meetings, which was really great. It was fun and it was great. But my freshman year, we just walked around with these big, like I think they had printer paper in them, these boxes, and we would walk around to all the different classrooms and pick up the tin cans and the plastic water bottles that students were recycling separately from the paper, because we don't have that recycling in the classrooms. And that was sort of my previous experience with environmental clubs, and I was just really inspired, especially by climate strikes. I guess that was early 2020, spring of 2020. There were some climate strikes there in May and March, and so I was really inspired by them, and I brought this crisis more to my attention, and so I was really motivated to make our club more active within our school and within our community. And so since then, we've been doing a lot different stuff than picking up recycling from all the classrooms. And I really hope that we're aspiring to do more with climate action plans and working more with the Color Penfield Green Group. And I really hope that, with the toolkit and with the network of other clubs can, grow to be like our sort of tagline, to more have more impact in their school and their district and in their community. Yeah, Cecily, do you have a thoughts on that?
So our club in the past has been mostly education on the climate crisis, which I think is really important, but I'm hoping that in the future we can turn that into more action through connecting with hopefully the newly formed Color Pittsford Green, and also just doing more, using the toolkit hopefully to pick out some projects that we find meaningful and implementing them at school and also in Pittsford as a whole, while also continuing the education aspect.
So those are all the questions that people put in the chat, so thank you. Are there any other questions, or they don't have to be those are kind of bigger questions if it's more practical, I don't know how to get into Slack, or I don't know, or I'm in the Slack but I can't find the channel or something, I don't know.
I have a question. How have you guys worked with educating people in your school outside of the climate club? I know that you can educate people that come to your meetings, but sometimes it feels hard to reach out to people who don't want to come to meetings or can't, don't have, yeah, that's my question.
Awesome. Cecily, do you want to take this, or should I, or?
I can take it. So we've been mostly doing educating in the clubs. It's definitely something we can work on, is educating outside of the clubs. But I know we've done posters throughout the school, which I guess is pretty simple way to raise awareness. You can do different things on the announcements if your school allows that. I think is a good option too, especially if it's well written to grab attention of students who maybe necessarily aren't as interested in climate originally. And then I think also social media is really good, because then your club can post on social media, and then people who aren't necessarily already following can also see what's being posted, and then maybe pique their interest in coming to the club.
Amber just posted a great question in the chat. Also, yeah, thank you, Cecily. That was a good answer. And yeah, so that's a great question. Have you started this at Penfield or Pittsford? If so, what responsive teachers and administrators? So I can speak for Penfield, of course. We actually, I was hoping maybe he'd be here tonight, but he wasn't here. Our mentor, Mr. Wallen, we met with him over the summer. So he's like, he knows of the toolkit. And you know, we're hoping to work with it going into the school year, of course. And you know, he's really excited about, you know, any resources we can get, and so the response has been very positive there. But in terms of sort of responsive administrators, the toolkit, this is kind of answering the question indirectly, but I think it still applies. At Penfield, we've been working sort of over the past year, or more like, no, over the past year, on trying to get a district-wide climate action plan. And that's still in the beginning stages, mainly because of complications with COVID. But we've met with our superintendent and our buildings and grounds director a couple times now. And so the response, that's a similar response that you might get when introducing anything to administrators. And they've been very excited about it and very open. There's definitely a little bit, especially when you're talking to administrators and buildings and grounds manager or superintendent, part of their job is to worry about money. And so that was something we experienced in the very beginning, was like, whoa, is this going to cost money? And it's like, no, it doesn't have to. In some ways it might, but there's ways to get around that. There's ways to get grants. There's ways to raise money for things. And so there is a bit of that that you have to deal with in terms of administrators. We've also worked on planning a green week, like a sort of a spirit week about climate change and environmental issues at our school, which never actually happened because of COVID. But we met with our principal for the high school, and she was very open to it. She was really great in helping us to understand sort of how this works with other groups that do you know, things like mental health awareness spirit week type things, or a district-wide spirit week. She helped us understand how that would work in relation to our club. So overall, I would say that the response has been very positive. I'd say that one thing that we really hope to include more of in the toolkit, and there's not a ton of this right now, but we're hoping to include more of sort of strategies to work with administrators that maybe are a little bit less open to these types of things. That was a really long response for Penfield, but Cecily, Pittsford.
I know my freshman year, we tried to implement the reusable trays, or at least get rid of the styrofoam trays. And that didn't go so well with talking to the administrators. I don't really know all the extreme details because I wasn't in the club leadership at the time, and that was mostly who did it, which I think might have been part of the issue. But I just know that I think it was mostly money that prevented that from happening. So I think money's probably the biggest barrier, and I think they're receptive to the idea. It's just the money is kind of the issue.
Yeah, and I think I hope as we work on the toolkit, and as we work on it, you know, what's there now maybe can help with this a little bit, but as we work on it more to try to help clubs come up with ways, or as the network grows, people can help each other come up with ways to get around that barrier. So Abby asks, what kind of projects would you recommend students to pursue during this very weird school year? That's a really good question, and it's hard because like we were kind of originally making the toolkit in the mindset that it's a normal school year, but it's not. And so in the project menu, at least, there's many of the actions things like creating an Instagram account don't really need to worry about, you know, social distance when you're creating an Instagram account. But something like thinking about, you know, reusable lunch trays. That's something that definitely poses an issue when you're thinking about COVID safety. And so right now, if you're starting to work on reusable school lunch trays right now, that probably isn't going to, might be, it's usually a little bit of a longer process, so it might not happen right now, but it's also really important to think about. And so something, you know, we've put in there is that, you know, maybe this isn't the best to pursue right now. In terms of what would be best to pursue, I would personally recommend, because it's something Penfield's working on, is the climate action plan. It's a bigger project and it requires, and I'm hoping to expand the section in the toolkit in the coming weeks here, because I've recently acquired a bunch of information about that, specifically Brighton, Bridget, where they've been doing a lot of really, really awesome work on a district-wide climate action plan. And I think that's a really good, it's a bigger project for sure, like I said, but it's a really good project, and it's one that can be, you know, meetings over Zoom. You can collaborate over, you know, Google Docs or Word, Office 365 documents, and yeah, I think it's that would be my recommendation of a project. Cecily?
I think the climate action plan is definitely a good thing and can definitely be started virtually. But I think the focus this year should be whatever project you think you can logistically do virtually, with how your school is handling clubs, how your school is handling meetings, because obviously this year is going to be a little more difficult. So any progress that you can make is good.
Awesome. So if there are any more questions, go ahead, ask them. If not, I think that will be it. Oh, yay, okay. Do you have any plans for resources or plans for younger students, elementary aged? I have some thoughts about this. Cecily, do you want to answer them maybe first?
I don't think we have anything in the toolkit really for younger students, but I think influencing stuff at the high school will also have an impact on the younger schools, and hopefully eventually we can expand the toolkit or expand the network to maybe include resources for younger students to learn about climate change also, and how they can make an impact as well.
I totally agree with what Cecily said about what's going on at the high school can influence the younger schools. And also with that, you know, part of that having greater impact on their school and their district is potentially that high school club could help to mentor. And that wasn't even something that I'd thought about ever, even in Penfield, but when I met with some clubs over the summer, that was something they brought up. They were like, oh, we could, you know, work with the middle school club, or we could work with the elementary school club. And so, you know, mentoring the younger clubs and helping them as a high school club is one thing that could happen there, as well as I think that a lot of the projects can be adapted sort of for a younger age group, especially if you have some willing parents that are willing to step in and help. If a mentor wants to use the toolkit and sort of think about that through a elementary or middle school lens, that's also very feasible. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so if that's everything, then I think we'll close out. Thank you guys so much for coming. We really appreciate you guys coming. You know, share it around, share it with your friends, share it with your clubs, share it with your friends in other districts. Yeah. Katie, Cecily, do you guys have anything else you want to say?
Great job, you guys, and thank you very much for tonight. This was a really beautiful job. Well done.
Thank you. I guess just thanks everyone for coming. It's really, yeah, Anna said it all.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good night.
Yeah,
Have a
bye.
great week.